Hi, everybody, and welcome to another one of my school leader interviews. This is episode 2 of series 2 of my school leader interviews with Vic Goddard. I'm absolutely delighted.
Just cutting in and out,
He's
Tom. I don't know
somebody
if
I've
that's me
wanted
or
to
you.
interview for ages. Oh, it
In
is.
fact, you've now
It
gone.
is. I'm not sure, actually. Oh,
I don't know if I'm frozen
I can still
or
see
you're
myself.
frozen. I look frozen. Oh, you're coming back.
I'm going to say,
There you are. You're back again.
am I back?
Yeah.
I think you're frozen. Hang on a minute. If you want to
Am I frozen?
rejoin, Vic, then hopefully we'll be okay.
You want me to come out and rejoin?
Yeah, hang on. There you go. I think you're back
All right
okay
now?
now. Can you see me? Yeah.
I can see you. All good.
I think we're good to go.
Okay, try again.
Technical difficulties could arise, so we'll see how it pans out, isn't it?
No worries.
As I was saying, I'm delighted to have you, to be able to interview you. I've wanted to interview you for a while. You're somebody that I admire. I know a lot of other people admire. In the interview today, we're going to be touching on personal, professional, lots of different elements that we're going to touch on. The first set of questions are quite quick fire, just to give a bit of an idea about you as a person. So,
no worries.
First one is, what's the first thing that you grab in the morning?
Ooh, for the last 5 months, unfortunately, and it's a habit I've got to break, it's been my phone. Because it's been checking for DFE updates that have come out at 1 minute past midnight the night before. So for the last 5 months, it's definitely been my phone. And unfortunately, I think it's become a habit I need to break.
Yeah. How are you going to do that?
I've got to move the charging station back downstairs into the kitchen and not by my bed. That's what I need to do. And then I won't pick it up first thing. Literally, it's become such a habit. I wake up for my whatever time I need to have, and the phone's in my hand, so I need to stop that.
Yeah, I think many will be the same. Who is your biggest inspiration in life?
It's my dad, I guess. It would be my dad for both professionally and personally, I guess. My dad was a real family. My dad wasn't academic at all. Left school at 14. Worked on the building sites, joined the army. Was a plumber and a heating maintenance sort of man for many years. So, he valued family and he valued our education. So he was chair of governors at my secondary school, just gave me some really good values. My dad's passed away a few years ago now, sadly, and I guess now what carries on is my son. I want to make sure that I do everything I can for him to give him the life that I want him to have. So. But yeah, throughout my life, my dad's been a real driving force, even though he's not here, because he wasn't academic. He didn't write particularly well. He didn't read particularly well, but he valued our education hugely and turned up to everything we were ever in. If I was in a crap play, he'd be in the front row. If I was playing rugby, he'd be there too. So alongside my mum, of course. My dad, I guess.
That's so nice. What do you think people notice about you?
That I'm very large. Just generally, I'm a big chap. I think probably I have a presence because of my size and my loud voice. So I think probably I'm a big character. I think.
Do you hope people notice about you?
That I actually listen to them.
Yeah.
I think probably more than anything else, I want people to think that when they talk to me, I'm actually genuinely interested, because I am. I hope that's what they think about me.
That's great. Can you still see me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, I think you're frozen on mine, but we'll just carry on.
I'm moving you go. So we can hear each other anyway.
We'll just carry on. It doesn't matter. What is your biggest weakness or your fatal flaw?
That is. I think my biggest weakness is probably that anxiety has been a real nightmare for me the last 3 or 4 years. I've really struggled with anxiety personally. And when you sort of try and unpick what makes you anxious, as a person, I know that you've suffered with anxiety as well in the past and probably still do. It's trying to let go of the things you can't control. And I think that's probably what the challenge is. I get anxious when I'm in the Ofsted window because I don't know when they're coming. If I know when they're coming, I'll be ready for them, and that's fine. And once they phoned, the anxiety goes away. Or it could be anything. before I was quite blasé, but even if I've got a difficult meeting the next morning, that will be in my head because I haven't got control of that until it starts. So yeah, I think that's been just the last few years, and I don't know why it's happened the last sort of 3 or 4 years, but that's certainly something I have to work at.
Yeah, well, join the club. I think for me, it used to be like, for me, I was probably worse, and it would dominate my brain to the point where I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I'd spend literally a whole weekend ruminating on one thing and one thing only until a Monday, and it was usually something that didn't really matter or it wasn't a major concern.
I think the thing that makes me really reflect back on it is that sometimes I know I'm not a nice partner, and I know I'm not a nice dad. I know my family don't get the best of me sometimes. Steve Tierney said that in his book, he said that when he said to his wife he was retiring, she said, "I wish I'd been your passion," to him. And when he said that to me, I was like, "Oh, that would have killed me. That would have broken my heart if she said that to me." But I'd be frightened to ask my partner because I think she might say the same.
That's really sad, but also I think something that will resonate with a lot of school leaders, and not even head teachers, just people, middle leaders, senior leaders.
Yeah, prioritization seems to be something that we struggle with.
I remember one senior leader I worked with quite a while ago now, who said that he'd missed his son's first swimming lesson. I'll never forget that. It's just one of them little conversations you have in my classroom, and I just remembered it because it was just so like sad.
What's funny is that at my school, if any member of staff comes to me to say they want to go to the nativity play or they want to go to something else, they will go. And if I have to cover their lesson, I'll cover the lesson. Normally staff do it between themselves. But then if I'm brutally honest with myself, would I ask people to cover me to do the same thing if it was my family? And I don't know if I would. And that's a mixture possibly of a bit of arrogance. You think they can't cope without you, but also a fear of not being around when something happens and that control. So I think it's something that it's a big weakness, and it's something I don't think you ever get on top of once you're in that role. But I've got to become better at prioritising for myself and not helping other people to prioritise their families. So
yeah, definitely. It's difficult though, isn't it? I suppose there isn't really.
I love my job, and that's the worst thing. When people talk about work-life balance, I love my work, so I don't feel that that's an imbalance for me working too hard. You know what I mean? I actually enjoy it. I sit reading a book about education, and people are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, enjoying myself. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. So we've said weakness. So what's your biggest strength?
I think I'm really genuine. I haven't got a mask, I don't think, and I think people then know where they are with you. And if people dislike me because of that, that's okay. They dislike the real me, and if people like me, they like the real me. So I think I hope I'm genuine.
How do you deal with that though? I guess in a community where everyone's watching you, everyone's watching your every move. How do you just say, okay, I'm going to be myself? How do you deal with maybe the people who aren't feeling that? Or
I think I've always struggled to pretend to be somebody else. I think we've all got our stick-on smiles that we have as teachers. You know what I mean? When you're having a bad day, it's not the kid's fault, so you stick the grin on and you get on with it. So I think we've all got that to a certain degree. But I'm fortunate. I've got a very close family, brothers and sister and, things like that. And I'm quite secure in that. And I don't need I haven't got a big group of friends, circle of friends. I've got lots of people I know, but I haven't got a big group of friends. I rely on a few very heavily. And I think that's it. I've never been one to Google myself or to look myself up online to see what somebody said. I wouldn't know. There's things that people say. Did you know this was said about you? I'm like, was it? I don't know. So it's either because I'm not organised enough to look, or I just can't be bothered. But I'm busy, so I don't go and look for the horrible things about myself.
Makes sense. What's the one personality trait that you don't have time for?
Dishonesty. Just plain and simple. If I can't trust somebody, even if you tell me I'm the worst person on the planet, if you mean it and you're being honest, I can accept that. But the moment you're disingenuous, the moment you're not honest, I will not trust you ever. And I'm closed to that. I trust. I give my trust freely. I give my trust freely. When I meet you and we're on a par, you have my trust. The moment you are dishonest to me, you've lost it forever.
That's right. What what is better for you, comfortable silences or non-stop conversation?
It's funny, right? And I think it was Pavarotti. A friend of mine told me a story about, I think it was Pavarotti and his daughter. And Pavarotti's daughter said to him, "Dad, I fell in love with somebody. I want to get married, etc., etc." And Pavarotti said to her, "How's the laughter?" And she said, "Great." "How's the sex?" And she said, "Great." And he said, "How's the silence?" And she waited and then went, "Yeah, that's good too." And he went, "Well, then marry him." And for me, actually being comfortable in silence is something I've worked at. I was always needed to be in the middle of everything, doing everything. And I think probably as I've grown in my role, I realised I need to be at the back. I need to step away and I need to just have some peace. So I've become much more comfortable in my own company and in silence, even, you know, silence with other people. But I'm not somebody who feels I need to fill the void.
Do you think that comes across in meetings and stuff like that as well, in work?
I
Like
get
listening
too
more.
excited. I think I get too excited in meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That interaction, if you're in a meeting that's worthwhile, that interaction between like-minded professionals is such a buzz. It's the best bit of the job. You know, we've had two meetings the last 2 days.
Yeah.
SLT about the plans for September. And they've been really difficult and we've really challenged each other. And, you know, somebody says, "Oh, no, I don't agree with that." But at the end of it, you go, "Cool, isn't that good?" So, I guess,
No,
I don't know if people think I like silence, but I do.
And what's better, being nice or being fair?
You can be fair by treating everybody like an idiot and horribly, but you can't do that if you're nice. And I think people mistake, you know, kindness and being nice for weakness. Actually, to maintain being nice when other people around you are being horrible is really bloody difficult. And so I'd probably take being nice, because I could be fair just by shouting at everybody, and that's not in me. So yeah, I'll take nice. I'm happy to be called nice.
I hear you. We're going to move on to like teaching and leadership now. So what's the most embarrassing thing that happened to you in class as a teacher?
Ooh, well, I've got a couple of those. One was as a trainee teacher. I would PE and maths were my subjects. I was PE main, maths secondary, but I always made sure I taught maths on all my teaching practice, and actually in every job I've ever had, I taught maths because I knew I'd end up too fat and with bad knees to be a PE teacher for long. So, and I remember as a trainee teacher teaching 3-dimensional symmetry to a class with my tutor sitting at the back. And after 45 minutes of them not understanding a word I said, I just looked at the tutor and went, "I'm done. You've got to come and do it." And the tutor came and did it. So that was awful because I thought I'd failed. And telling a set of parents at an open evening, a parents' evening, their child was great at high jump and he was in a wheelchair. Yeah, that face, Tom. That's the face I pulled as well. He had the same first name as another young man in my class who was good at high jump, but he'd been in a wheelchair since birth. So thankfully, I was an NQT. The parents laughed and went, "Let me introduce you to him." And they called him over, and over he wheeled in his electric wheelchair. And I was like, I may have got the wrong child. And I think the dad said, "No shit." I think that's what he said. That was bad. I never ever went into a parents' evening underprepared again.
Yeah, that is a bad one, I have to say. That's not
it's not one I'm proud of. It really isn't.
Yeah. What was your worst head teacher?
Losing a student. Lost one young man while he was a student at the school of a heart defect. He was ill for a while. And 2 young men who'd only just left us. So within a year of leaving us, had both committed suicide. Yeah, that was tough. Sorry. It's still tough.
Yeah. How long ago was that? Was that a while ago?
Jamie's the reason we did Educate in Essex, because he passed away just before Educate in Essex was offered to us. And if he hadn't passed away, I would have put the phone down and said no instantly. But
really,
the life, you know, I'd spent a term or so with the kids talking about life being short and take opportunities, don't be scared to take risks, etc. And then I get a phone call from Channel 4. So I'm not a disingenuous person, so I had to talk to him. And at that point, then it sort of went from there. But yeah, so he was 2000. He must have been December 2010, I think, 2009. And the other 2 were in the last few years. Yeah, and you know, male suicide is a real issue for me. And you know, talking and trying to be open and honest myself, to be a model for other people, to say, look, it's okay to be in a position of responsibility, but have anxiety, or to feel, you know, you're not worthy and stuff like that. And it's okay, because that's actually what most people feel. So don't try and hide it. So yeah, they were without doubt the worst days.
Makes perfect sense. When you're hiring teachers, what kind of things do you look for, and what's your, if you were to say like your prototype teacher, what attributes would they have?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think lots of people would. I've had conversation in the past. Can you be an introvert and be an excellent teacher? That's an interesting one, because an interview, introverts often don't come across as the best candidate, but actually they can be the best teacher. I guess what I want to see is a passion for that person to be ambitious for their teaching. Because we can all be ambitious for the next role, the head of department role, the assistant head role, the deputy head role. But actually, I think we massively undervalue those people that just want to stay in the classroom and be the best teacher they can be, and give every one of those kids the best things they can have in education. So trying to get that out into, their subject knowledge, their passion for their subject, not just a passion for children, but a passion for their subject, because that is intoxicating. That's what young people will inspire other young people. That's why that's why I was a PE teacher. That's why I was a maths teacher. I had exceptional maths and PE teachers when I was a kid who inspired me, and they inspired me because they loved their subject. So I think the biggest thing for me is that's love of their subject, I think.
You touched on there about introverting in interview situations, and what advice might you give then to somebody who maybe is introverted how can they put that passion across to you?
I think firstly to be honest about it and just say, I'm not one of the loud look at me kind of people, but don't underestimate the fact how much I want this job, or how much I love this subject, or I want to be a teacher. I think you can show passion without juggling. You can just be honest. That I think a level of honesty about, I'm not going to be volunteering to be in the school play with you, Vic. I'm not. But you asked me to do something. My books will be marked brilliantly. My lessons will be planned superbly. And what more do you want? So I think a level of honesty. If you try and hide the fact you're an introvert and be all this interview, it just comes across as disingenuous. So I think a level of honesty in an interview, and say, to say who you are. This is who I am. I'm not all singing, all dancing, but I am a bloody good teacher, and I'll show you that.
No, that's brilliant. What's the worst thing about UK education right now?
The accountability system is the worst thing. It affects everything we do. It doesn't feel like it's about making us better. It feels like it's about catching us out. It seems to be measuring us when we don't need to be measured. It puts us against each other when we don't need to be put against each other. At no point is it better for us to be in competition in a locality. We're best off sharing our strengths and owning up to our weaknesses. So it's frustrating, because there's so much masses of fantastic knowledge within our accountability framework, within Ofsted, but it's used in such destructive ways, and some of it isn't their fault. It's because how we feel about it, but we feel about it like that for a reason. We haven't just suddenly become this sort of anxious about it. It's because their behaviour in the past has meant that, I've worked at passmores for 20 years. I've been head for 10 years. I've survived, and I called it that, a few Ofsted inspections now. I shouldn't be sitting here as a man who's still got many years to go in his job, counting how many Ofsted inspections I've got until I retire.
100%.
That's not how it should be, and they've got to stop denying that's how it makes us feel, and go, why? What can we do to help somebody who's like me and like lots of other people, who's passionate about their job, will do anything for their community, but still waking up for 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, feeling sick to their stomach because they're waiting for Ofsted to phone. Do
you think that's happening now? I mean, I do, but I'm asking you, do you still think that's happening now? Do you still think?
Without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. I think when
regardless of the new framework and all that.
I mean, when the lockdown was on, I've been involved in a few articles, but I got a call from my local authority saying Ofsted had been in touch about my safeguarding at my school. And I was like, where does that come from? And it was from a Guardian article that I was part of. And I'll be honest, my hackles went up. I contacted sort of people I know to ask advice. And the reality was, if I came back away from it, well, if I've spoken about some horrible things that my community's had to deal with, it's probably Ofsted should be phoning up my LA and going, what support's in place for Vic? But my default reaction wasn't that they were doing that. My default reaction was they were trying to catch me. And until they change that mindset in people like me, then we're never going to get all we can out of the framework. It's still too skewed for schools that don't have challenging communities, that young people don't behave badly sometimes, and they do in my school behave badly sometimes, and we have to deal with it. And that's the reality. That's because I choose to work for my community, and I shouldn't be punished for the choice of community I serve.
Absolutely. Where do you think that new leaders go wrong?
Normally trying to control too much and not delegate enough. Delegation, I remember my first day on my MPQ8 back 20 years ago, and the tutor said, the one thing you have to learn to do in your job is delegate, but accept the fact that when you delegate, it won't be done how you want it done or in the style you want it done. And actually, I disagree with him in that, because actually, when I delegate to people who are much, much better than me at what I'm asking them to do. Because if I was the best person to do that job, I'd do it. Yeah. And so, for me, actually, that art of delegation and trusting people, because I think too often the new leaders are the bottleneck to improvement. So you guys go and do this, but all come and tell me what you're doing before you do anything else. So then it all has to go through me. Well, actually, learn your leaders early. If you're going in as a middle leader, or you're going as an assistant head, learn your leaders around you and trust them to get on with it. And if they need help, be there for them. And if they get it wrong, say, okay, well, how do we avoid getting it wrong in the future? Because then you do that once and then you have to do it again. So I think overly controlling things and not trusting the people they've got around them is often an anchor for improvement, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. What percentage of you in work is an act?
Very little. Very little. When the head that was before me, I was his deputy, he moved on to a multi-academy trust role. And I asked him he was one of the most important teachers in my life. He trusted me to be assistant head at a young age, then deputy head. And I applied and interviewed for one job before I got the passmores job. And I pulled out after day one. I was invited to day two, but I pulled out after day one. And he came to me about 2 or 3 days later and went, you can't leave. I need to leave because you're the right person to take this school forward, which I thought was a remarkable thing. But then once he'd got a job, I said, come on, Kevin, give me some advice. And he goes, there is a gravitas to our job. And I'm really crap at gravitas. I've worked out. I haven't got it. I haven't got that separation. People who I am exactly who I am right now, I'll be that same person in school tomorrow. Which then makes things personal, and I think that's when it becomes difficult, because there is no shield. They hate the act, they don't hate me, but actually they don't like me, they don't like me. There's no act.
Yeah, so there's no like detachment. It's like this is no. Me in work and outside and so on. Right, digging a bit deeper now, because I know you touched on we can't do this whole interview without talking a little bit about educating Essex. Of course. Right? So thinking back to that experience, what made you say yes? You've touched on this a little bit. I have, What made you say yes? Because I know heads. I know one, I think, head who said no. So it's like, what made you say yes?
I've met, according to themselves, I've met about 200 heads who all said no. It's really interesting. Whenever I've gone through a conference, certainly just after it had gone on, and I was talking at a conference, I'd have 10 heads come through and go, yeah, they asked me to do that, but I turned it down. I'm thinking, what the hell do I say to that? Oh, good idea, or what? Why did you say no? But I guess I said already. We said yes partly. Jamie Bone, a boy in year 10, had passed away from a heart defect as a big surprise. We didn't expect him. He wasn't ill particularly. And we'd had a term of kids with saying, take risks. Don't just say no to everything. So I literally got a call, just a cold call in my office from somebody saying they're from Channel 4. Can they come and talk to me about a one-off 1 hour special, which is what I thought it was going to be to start with, if I'm honest. And I was like, normally I'd say no, but yeah, fine, come and talk to me. And they came and spoke to me, and I'll be honest, when somebody's sitting opposite you at a table saying, we're going to do this at your school, and I promise you we'll come out of this as friends, and I promise you we won't damage your school, you've got a choice to make at that point. You believe them or you don't believe them. That's it. Yeah. There is no other way. You either go, okay, And if you're not going to damage my school and we're going to leave as friends, and that's okay. Let's do it. Let's do something different. But if I don't trust you, I don't. And I looked at David Clues, who was the producer director, who then won a BAFTA for the program, and looked him in the eye and thought, I did tell him that if he did damage my school, I would put him under it. I said, I know some really horrible people from South London, and you're going to be under a motorway if you damage my school. And he looked at me to see if I was joking, and then realised I was. But yeah, that was it. And so I said, okay, speak to governors. I didn't make the decision. The governors did. Obviously, I would hope that the governors would have said no if I'd have been against it. And it was quite soon after there'd been the Jamie's Dream School had been on telly, and it made teaching look awful. It just made it look like we didn't need to be skilled. You just need to stand up and talk to kids. So that stuck in my craw a little bit, because I know how much brilliance goes on in every classroom around the country, So it was, if why say no, I guess, was the reason. And then the governor said yes. So, and there we were.
What was your favourite moment, and what was your most stressful moment from it? Before that, really, I was going to ask you, just before we do that, is when you're there, because this is what's always intrigued me, is you're obviously very aware that everything's being filmed, mics, everything. You must be very.
You're not
self-aware.
You're not, to be fair, you're not aware, because if you ever watch any of the educating series, you'll see the cameras on the wall. They're about the size of a size 4 football. They're about that big. They're a little ball that sits on the wall, and you can't see the camera inside it. It's a housing, and the camera moves around inside it, so you can't be certain who they're looking at. Right. And if I'm honest, so there were 65 cameras around the school, right? And there were 3 in my office. And the only time I ever became really aware of it was when my office was silent and you heard the camera go, and the camera you could hear a camera turning, like, oh, there's a camera here. That, and on my journey home occasionally I go, bloody hell, I forgot the cameras are there. What did I scratch today? What did I, what noises did I make? What have they caught on camera? So if you're a teacher, Tom, if you're dealing with kids, they are really, really, they make you focus on them. They are all encompassing. And so the cameras become background noise. When there's not a human being standing there with a camera, it's just a ball on the wall. So, I got used to the fact when they were filming, I'd get out of my car, and there'd be a little production assistant standing next to my car with a microphone, and say, I'd clip that on, put it in my pocket, and get on with my day. I sort of got used to that, I guess. But yeah, it was.
When you say when they were filming, how long were they filming? Were they
they're
just
only actually
all the time?
No, there was only the fixed rig cameras. The ones on the wall were only in for a half term. So all of the stuff.
But during that half term, they were filming the whole time. They were just permanently.
65 cameras around. They had a caravan in the car park and a porter cabin. The porter cabin was where, if you saw any of the camera pieces, you looked like they had lockers behind them. That was in a metal shed in our car park, not in the school at all. And so they had 65 cameras, and in their caravan they had 65 screens, so they could see every screen live at all times. But there were 3 screens, I think, at the bottom, and they were the ones they were recording. So they were looking at all of these, and then they'd go, okay, let's look at that one, see what's happening. And then they pull that camera down, they'd watch that one camera. And then if a story evolved, they use the cameras around the school to follow the story around the school.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be honest, the editing, it took 7 weeks to edit one program.
Yeah.
So the editing was phenomenal. Their storytelling was phenomenal. That's what it is. It's a storytelling. Definitely. Episode 1, Stephen's got a Christmas tie on and an Easter tie on, both in the same week, according to that. And he definitely wouldn't have done that. His OCD wouldn't have let that happen. So, they told stories. That's what they did. They created a narrative and they told a story.
Fantastic. And coming back to my original question, favourite moment, most stressful moment?
There's a few
from watching it back, I suppose.
I think what's become one of my favourite moments is one of our students, when we were playing snowballs in the yard, standing about 2 feet away from me and smashing it in my face, and me just controlling myself. I mean, I knew when I watched it back, I was like, you are so lucky. I didn't just go mad and bury you in the snow, because that's what I wanted to do.
Reminds me of that Harry Redknapp. Have you seen that Harry Redknapp clip where
yes,
the player hits him a bit like that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And the worst thing was that was the son of a member of staff that did that. So, it was, yeah. So that was fun. I can't go any further than Ryan in the last episode. My young man with the challenge of Asperger's, just standing up in assembly and talking to everybody. I mean, I still can't watch it without crying, because it wasn't the fact that he did that. It was the fact that he felt comfortable to do that. That's the bit that makes me really happy, that a young man with the challenges he's got in front of his peers, which is a really difficult thing, still felt comfortable to stand up and say what he said. So, yeah, they were definitely my favourite moments, I think.
Absolutely. And who are you still, so, I can still remember some of the kind of characters from that series. So who are you still in touch with, from, I mean, are any of the staff still there?
No, I mean, most of the staff are still there, if I'm honest. Steve Grew left and went on to headship, and then came away from headship and is a history teacher up in Cambridgeshire now. But yeah, the assistant heads are still there. Beck Conway, who was there working with Vinny as an NQT, she's now an assistant head. So our staff turnover is incredibly low. We lose maybe 2 or 3 staff a year maximum. So there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot still there.
And obviously, I followed some of the students from the series. So how does it feel when you see their successes or otherwise now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a Gabby Burton was in one of the episodes where she was cyberbullied. Somebody said, "I'm watching you." That was Gabby. She went to be our head girl. She then came back and was a trainee history teacher at our school, and is now a history teacher at a school down the road, because I didn't have a job for her. So I see her a lot, and I know her brother, and I know her mum and dad very well, and they're sort of a very important aspect of our school. Obviously, the one that you're probably alluding to is Vinny. And Vinny, unfortunately, is in prison at the moment, serving, I think he got 6 years for running a county lines operation out of Harlow. And that's incredibly difficult. I still work with his family. I still work with his mum. I can't stop myself from working out how we could have avoided him being in that position. Because he's a genuinely very nice young man when you deal with him one-to-one, and he's not out. But we didn't teach him that there is no shortcut to being rich. We didn't teach him there is no shortcut to having a nice life. You've got to work at it. And, dealing drugs is a shortcut. And eventually that shortcut gets taken away from you. So, Vinny's a tough one for me. Vinny's a tough one for me, because there was a young man with so much potential, bright, sporty, articulate, good-looking little chap. And, he's in prison, and it's his second stretch, I think. So, that's tough. That's tough. Ryan, I still see. So Ryan, our young chap from the assembly, his mum works at Anglia Ruskin University, which is a university local to here, and I got an honorary doctorate from Anglia Ruskin a couple of years ago, and that was because of her. I know it was. So I see him. He's at university now, which is amazing, and he's doing really well. So, and he's one of life's radiators. If I see him, I feel better for the rest of the day. So I'm still in contact with most of them one way or the other. I still see them. They don't move far from Harlow often, so they'll often pop in and just say hello.
That's nice. And during feed, another. Joy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
During the filming process, BuzzFeed, who are another amazingly reliable news information, reported that you asked producers to focus on the school's non-troublesome kids who just get on with it for one episode. Is that
true?
Yeah,
that's true. It's absolutely true. I mean, we had a head girl at the time, fantastic. She was a fantastic young lady, played the musical instrument, was in every production, was in everything. And I said to them, I said, can you do me a favor? Can you follow her for a day? Because she's amazing. She's an amazing human being. Follow her. She's going to inspire lots of people. And they did. And they came back to me the other day and went, Vic, the kids sitting down, just doing as they're told, with their head down, doing their work, is not going to make much television. And I was like, okay. And when people have criticised that my series and the subsequent series is for always following the naughty children, or it's like saying that there's not enough gardening in Top Gear. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. It's about challenges. It's about how schools work with challenging young people. That's what it's about. So don't expect it to be something else. That's not what they're selling, you know. So the key thing for me was, as long as during any of their filming, they actually allowed us to show the whole journey. That actually, if we dealt with something, they watched us deal with it to the end, not just, you know, stop it for sensationalism. And you know, I think they were very fair to us, so I didn't have any problems with it.
Definitely. And actually as well, Grazia, apparently, I don't know if there's truth in this, you'll have to confirm or deny, put you in the so-called chart of lust.
No, I'll be honest, it wasn't me. It was my deputy, Mr. Drew. He made it to number 7 in Grazia's lust list in October that year.
I read it was you.
They may have said it was me. It definitely wasn't. It was definitely the much more photogenic and lovable Stephen Drew. So and I abused it for months. And if I see him, I'll still abuse him for it. So it was definitely Stephen, not me.
Amazing. Now moving on to more kind of about passmores and current stuff. At the end of June, the Times reported no online work for pupils at school that started in educating Essex. This seems to be a fabrication on what you actually said based on what I read. What is the story with that, and how did that come about?
Well, the headline went out in the paper that no work set from educating Essex school, no online work, no work. And I hadn't seen it. I'll be honest, if I do an interview for the newspaper, I often don't see it in the press. Somebody else sees it and tells me about it. So my phone suddenly started texting. I'd actually we'd taken a family bike ride from our house down to the Olympic Park. It's about 20 miles. And so my phone wasn't on. But I got there and somebody said, "Have you seen the Times we've been stitched up?" So I went and saw this no work being set. And I have got the journalist's mobile number. So I texted her and said, "Have you seen the headline? That's outrageous." And she literally instantly phoned me back and went, "Vic, you're absolutely right. That isn't what they should have said. It should say online work, and I'll get it changed for the online version." And I'm like, "Great." But now that we've got however many copies of that newspaper out in circulation, I can't get back. The reality is, Tom, that I don't believe that as many people had access online as people think they did. And we surveyed our families, and we are very aware that well over 400 of them had no access. This is not an access to work. You can browse, you can do a pop quiz, but you're not going to read War and Peace on it and write an essay about it. You know, so when you ask students, have you got online access at home? I don't think that's enough of a question. Have you got online access on a piece of hardware that's suitable for you to work on? On all these companies that sell, you know, technology on your phone, that's great for 15 minutes. But actually, if we're going to educate these young people constantly online, then they need to have an iPad or they need to have a laptop. That's what they need to have. They need to have something bigger. And so we didn't have that. And so our guiding principles through lockdown was safety and equity. And so we were doing things safely. Kids weren't in school, and the ones that were in school were being looked after. But equity meant that the work we set, everybody could access it the same way. That was the key thing for me. So we like everybody else, set online learning for the first sort of couple of weeks. And then we got information back from families they didn't have access, and it was putting a huge amount of pressure on families when they only had one device, and mum needed it for work or dad did. And so we made the decision that we would put all of our learning onto paper, and we'd make booklets. And once every 3 weeks, we'd send them home everything they needed to be a success. So if in that booklet for English they needed to have coloured pencils, we'd send them coloured pencils in that pack on a notebook and everything else. So every 3 weeks they received this envelope with everything they needed as a family to work. But what we didn't do is go, it has to be done at this time of day. Because I don't know if that time of day is suitable for that family. That might be the worst time of day for that family. And all I'm doing is putting pressure on a family that's already living on top of each other. And all I'm doing is putting more pressure on them. So we spoke to something called the Phoenix Group, who are about home learning students, and we said, okay, what do we do? How can we make sure they work but not put inordinate pressure on people? And so we set a lot of challenges. So food technology was suddenly make a meal for your family and take a couple of pictures on your phone and keep it, and we'll know that. And so we gave them loads of challenges, and also a book on English, a book on maths, and a book on science, so they could do, you know, proper written work in. Then when the next pack was sent out, so 3 weeks later we sent the next pack out. In that pack was an envelope with a stamp on it and our school address, and so they sent us back the work from that pack that I'd already done. So every 3 weeks we had work coming in to mark, and every 3 weeks we had new work going out, and I could be 100% certain that 100% of my children could access it if they chose to. So for me, it wasn't. I think we have massively overestimated how many young people have the appropriate technology to learn online. Not one of these things, actually something they can type on and they can see in a bigger picture. So to say that I was annoyed at that article and what it led to believe would be an understatement, because by doing it on paper, the staff had to really create this stuff, then mark it, then send it back. I was actually making their life probably more difficult, and then they weren't getting the credit for it. So I was slightly vexed is the best way to describe it.
Yeah. You've been principal and latterly co-principal at Passmores for a long time. I think, how many years is it now?
So I've been at Passmores 20 years, assistant head, deputy head, and now 10 as principal, and now a couple as co-principal.
Do you think it's harder nowadays for teachers and leaders, but particularly leaders, to stay at the same school for as long as you have? Do you think in the now, if you were starting now, you still love the school just as much as you did if you were starting now? Do you think you could have done the same thing now?
I would have left Passmores if I hadn't got the headship. So I was an ambitious person. You know, when I was an NQT, I had a plan to be ahead by the time I was 40 and out the door by 55. I was always the plan. I'm the sort of person that when I do something, I want to do it at the highest level. And as far as I was concerned as a teacher, and I know nobody thinks like that, and that's fine. The highest job for me to get as a teacher is head teacher.
Yeah.
So that's what I aspired to. And I left schools gutted to leave them because the next opportunity had come up. I did 4 schools in 6 years at the start of my career. And by the end of that 6 years, I was a head of department at an international school overseas with amazing facilities and having a lovely life. And then then things slowed down, and I suddenly got into roles where I was being developed, and the next opportunity came up in the school I was at. So as I said earlier, I had one interview for a headship before getting the Passmores headship because I was ready to start being a head. And if it hadn't come up at Passmores, I would have gone. I think there were real pluses and minuses about doing it the way I've done it and about growing with the school. I think, you know, from my perspective, the loyalty I have from my staff is phenomenal. It's humbling. You know, lockdown has been reasonably easy to manage because if I ask for volunteers, I get 100 of them. And so that's, you know, that takes time to build. You know, that's not something that happens quickly. So, you know, but yeah, I think it's tough. I think I've been incredibly fortunate to get into a school like Passmores, which I absolutely love, and for a community I absolutely love, and for the next opportunity to come up in the school I'm at. And I think, you know, my only regret is I didn't stay as a PE teacher for long enough. I love PE. I love sport. When I retire, I will spend my retirement traveling around the world watching sport. That's what I'll do. You know, I need to do a British Lions tour. I need to do a Boxing Day test in Australia. I need to do all those things, you know. So, and I loved being a PE teacher. I had the PE teacher strut. I had the whole works. Do you know what I mean? I loved it. Yeah. But the opportunities came up for me to move on and take a promotion, so I did. And in hindsight, I wish I hadn't rushed out of doing the job that I was probably more in love with than ever. And I love this job. But if you said you could just go back 20 years and be a PE teacher for a couple of years, Vic, I'd probably take it.
Has there been a time as principal, co-principal at Passmores where you felt under threat in your role from the Ofsted or from Ofsted or government to the point where you've been really on the verge?
Yeah, I mean, irrationally, when the Guardian article was out and I got this call from the LA saying Ofsted had been in touch, that I thought they were coming for me. You know, I genuinely thought that you know that they're being vindictive. They've got their teeth into me, and I actually don't think they were in hindsight, in now cold light of day. But at the time, I did. I just think this. I don't ever know from a personal perspective. I don't think there's ever been. I felt, you know, they've got it in for me. But I do think that for me to feel the way I do about Ofsted when we're in the Ofsted window, and I'm a strong person with a really, you know, a really good governing body who do question me and push me, but they trust me as well. That year when we were due the Ofsted in October and they said I hadn't come by sort of May time, I'd spent 8 months of my life sitting at my kitchen table with my family all asleep until 2, 3, 4 in the morning, looking at bits of data, trying to work out how I made it look better than it was. And, you know, it made me ill. It made me ill. And probably I still suffer from that a little bit. I think we're due Ofsted again in about a year's time. And I need to work out how I manage that better, because it won't help me be a nice person. And actually it won't help the school. Once they're here, I smash it. I'm good with that. But actually the anxiety leading up to it, that's being in the window. I call it the cycle of courageousness. When you're just having Ofsted, you're sitting up going, oh, I can do anything. Let's break all the rules. But the closer you get to that window, the less courageous you get. The less courageous you get, the less risks you take for your children, and the more compliant you are. And compliance is important sometimes, but also doing what's right for your community is important too.
I mean, I've obviously thought about this in the past as well, but do you think that really the future, particularly post-COVID, for the inspectorate needs to be just as a health and safety, just as a more a compliance body for health and safety, strip out the grading, strip out everything basically apart from health and safety?
Grading's toxic. There is no the grade, you know. They advocate, and they have advocated us not grading children's work for years, because, you know, it doesn't. All they do is look at the grade. And they don't look at what the constructive criticism is, and they do the same thing. So grading's toxic. Grading creates schools down the road with Ofsted banners out the front of their school, you know, and it's just not right. It'll be interesting. I think
sometimes I guess you don't buy in yourself, then you punish yourself. If you don't buy into it. If you say, like you said, the courageous cycle, if you like, I'm guessing there's pressure on you to comply, and that's why a lot of people just end up buying in, because it's better than opting out.
My biggest regret as a head is to when the announcement by Gove came out, and he said about only first entries count, and if they sit it early and then resit it, they'll still count the first grade. Now, we used to have our students sit maths in year 10, because actually one of the things our community struggled with at the time was confidence in themselves. And so we gave them a go in year 10 and said, it's a free go. It doesn't matter. It wasn't to gain the system. It wasn't to boost our grades. It was to help these young people find some capacity if they got a good grade, to not feel that pressure, but also to give those that were uncertain a bit of a lift. Come on, you've done this. Look where you are now. In a year's time, you'll be further. The moment Gove announced that, we stopped doing it. I stopped doing it. I told the school to stop doing that. You know, I went to the leadership team and goes, this is what the Secretary of State said, we've got to stop. And I regret it to this day, because we were doing it for the right reasons. And I should have had the cojones to go, actually, we're carrying on. I don't care what you say.
It's easy to say when the stakes are so high.
Yeah. And that's the problem. We were in the window, you know, and I thought they're going to come in and they're going to point fingers at that, and we're going to fail our Ofsted. And Harlow's a small town, and if you have failed your Ofsted, you struggle to recruit. So, you know, that's my biggest regret, is the fact that I was compliant because I wasn't courageous enough, because Ofsted were due, and that's not how it should be.
That links in, I suppose, to another question I have, which is there anything you've done as a head teacher in the past that you cringe at today? And could maybe try and give an example of something you've done, or
wearing a tank top on Educating Essex was a big mistake. I remember seeing a model wearing a tank top in GQ just before the filming started. I thought, I'm going to look great in that. That's going to look smashing on me. So I bought a black tank top, and all I did was look like an overstuffed sausage. And so that's still, I have that tank top. It hangs on my door in my office. It hangs on the back of my door in my office to remind me to never follow fashion ever again, and I've managed that ever since. That definitely makes me cringe. I think some of the things I bought into in the past, sort of, I think we've become more educated about research and things like that over the last few years. I think there's bandwagons, of course, but I think some of the things that, certainly back in the sort of 90s when I was first teaching, there were certain things that I took as being gospel because somebody told me it was true, and I believed them. I didn't ever bother to check out if it was true and look at the research. So, you know, waltz and wheels, making them all right their learning objectives in their book at the start of lessons, all that sort of stuff. I go, why did you not just pick up a book and read it, Vic, and work out if it's actually true, rather than to believe the snake oil salesman that stood up in front of me and told me to do it? So I've got quite a few cringes like that.
Yeah. When you think about fellow head teachers, who stands out to you as the person you admire? I mean, I know it's difficult to pick one.
It is difficult.
But
Can I pick two?
Yes.
All right, there are two, and I'm going to cheat again. They're actually recently retired. I think the two I choose is Steve Tierney. His intellect is frightening. He is such a bright man. And I sit in head teachers round table meetings with him, and he'll say something, and I go, bloody hell, you're clever.
Yeah.
And he worked in Blackpool for a long time, and that's not an I mean, you've worked in Blackpool. That's not an easy place to work at times. Some schools it's really tough, and he worked his career there, and that's. I think I've got a lot. His intellect and his absolute resilience about his community is something I really value. And the other recently retired one's Ros McMullen, and Ros is it's going to upset people because she's forthright and she doesn't pull her punches, and sometimes people don't like that. But I did a peer review at her school with some of my SLT, and I thought she'd made some mistakes as part of that, and that's quite a difficult thing to do when you're friends and you go in actually. And I saw things which I didn't like, and I was honest with her and told her, and her response to me made me go, "That's leadership." You know, I mean, she just took it on the chin and went, "Okay, I obviously need to look at that again. I thought I was right. This is what I thought," and was really welcoming of criticism. And she's worked in some really tough places and always had an absolute clarity of what she's doing and why she's doing it. And so, again, I don't mind her being brutal sometimes and being very blunt about stuff because I know where I stand. That's about being honest. And so, probably my head teachers roundtable group are amazing. Like, they all frighten me in different ways. But those two particular leaders over time that I aspire to be more like, I think it's those two.
Amazing. You've talked recently as well about the impact of COVID on students and staff, and you said recently, "I've seen the impact of losing a teenage lad to suicide, and it was massive. It's the thought of suicide that's really difficult for me. What's the impact going to be of so many parents and grandparents dying? I've never existed in a space where a community has lost so many people." Now, I know Passmores has been hit like many other schools. What is your plan for September in terms of dealing with this element of things, in terms of bereavement, but also the mental health implications of lockdown?
I mean, it's interesting. You know, we're doing this because of Twitter. You know, that's why we're doing this. We met each other on Twitter, and that's why this is happening. And Mike Armiger is somebody I met on Twitter who does bereavement services and support. And he's done online training with my staff through lockdown around bereavement and what we can do to notice. And for me, the biggest thing I think for all schools to do is to make sure they're not just getting teachers to focus on it. It's got to be a whole school approach to bereavement, and because we never know who that young person is going to choose to confide in or choose to let the secret out. And so it needs to be the cleaners and the MDAs and the office staff, because they may choose one of them. That it shouldn't just be about teachers. I think that's a really big thing for me. And the other thing is that there's no piece of the jigsaw that's too small. So if we've got an online safeguarding piece of kit, like everybody else. We use My Concern, other people use different things, and trying to make sure that staff, even if it's the smallest thing, and it might mean nothing, it might be really inconsequential in what looks like a big picture, but it could be the final piece of the jigsaw that completes the picture for us on that child and what they're dealing with. And so for everybody to notice and to share. And I think, empowering everybody to feel that they're an important part of that's been key. And that's about bereavement, but that's also just about lockdown and what people are dealing with. Talking to our local police, burglary has almost disappeared because everybody's been at home, so there's been no chance to burgle. Crime has generally gone down, but domestic violence has gone up massively. So we're going to be dealing with young people who've been witness to that and maybe been a victim of that. And it's a matter of us finding enough time in the day, because we're all going to be cracking the whip about English and maths, aren't we, and science and all the other things. We've got to catch up. But we've also got to find a time in the day where we sit and talk to these kids and go, "How are you feeling? Okay, I'm here if you want to talk to me. Not forcing things on them, not forcing them to talk to me, but just letting them know that we will have time for them if they need it. And, you know, and that means any of us. I'm really lucky. My door in my office is directly opposite the PE office. So it's a really busy place. And kids will often put their head in and say, all right, so how are you doing? And I want that to be the case, but I want them to be that for everybody, not just for me. So it's about a collective approach. Everybody's role is important in that. And we all got to notice, even if we notice something tiny, we notice that Billy is no longer talking to that group of friends. Let's just write it down in case there's a reason why Billy's ostracized himself from that group and we don't know about it yet. And maybe Billy will tell us at some point. But at the moment, he's not, and that's fine. But we've noticed there's a change. And noticing the small pieces of the jigsaw is going to be key for me. So I think it is unprecedented. I think there is the potential that we underestimate how much care we're going to need to give these kids to get them on an even playing field. And that's got to be a collective effort.
Yeah. Penultimate question. Results days as a teacher and head teacher. I know you spoke to the Guardian last year and you said, I'll sleep badly for weeks before results day, especially if I know that Ofsted will visit us within the next academic year and our results will be heavily scrutinised. I know obviously this year there aren't performance tables and everything else. In the past, it's made me quite ill. I'll sit up thinking about different scenarios, wondering how my results will be treated publicly and the impact they'll have on school in general. So what have been your best and worst experiences of this? And obviously this year, maybe touch on this year, your experience this year and how that's been for you personally and the staff and everything else.
The best experiences are never as a head. And I don't think any head teacher will ever say that my best experience is when I got results as a head. My best experiences is still when the class that I'd worked my absolute butt off for get the grades they deserve. That's without a doubt. I can think back to PE classes I taught. I can think back to a year 11 maths class I taught 3 years ago at Passmores. And they were a group of boys who, let's just say, were not the most enthusiastic mathematicians. And I had all of them in the class because I was the one taking that burden off other people. And they loved having the head teach them. And I loved having them. And I made a real effort to not be in the school for those lessons. And I made them my priority. And they knew that if I was in that class and I closed the door, and if somebody come to try to talk to me as a head, I'd say, no, I'm just a maths teacher now. You have to go and talk to somebody else. They loved that. And we got the best residual. My class had the best residual that year of anybody in the maths department. I'm still more proud of that than I am of most of the other things I've ever done, because that's who I am. I'm a head teacher. The teacher's still important to me. So results as a teacher will always win results as a school because it's yours and it belongs to you. I think the worst year was probably the first year of Progress 8, because value added had gone, contextual value added had gone, all those sorts of things, and I knew that we are probably still another year or so away from having a curriculum that helps us get that grade. We're not going to change it for change's sake, and so I know every year that our grades are going to be lower than others because we've not chosen to make everybody do the EBAC, for instance. We don't feel bucket 2. That was a tough year because I still felt we were doing it right. We were still 4% above national average for young people going on to sustained education, employment and training. Our children were successful when they left us at 16, because we're only 11 to 16 schools and no A levels, but they were successful in the courses they went on to, and that made me proud. But I was still named on the front page of the Daily Mail as being a failing school, and we were.
Do you think the problem is? I mean, I've written about this in the past. I've got my opinions on this in terms of linking teacher performance with results in general. I mean, where do you sit on that? I mean, do you think that's a thing that you still believe is the right way to go in terms of
we don't set sort of percentage targets for staff for student performance. Ours are about them improving the quality of their own performance as a teacher, which by default will improve the quality of the outcomes the young people get and of the experience they get. So, for us, it's professional development. It's a professional conversation as adults to adults, as teacher to teacher. So, of course, outcomes are important. These young people need those tickets to get into the game. That's what they need. But it can't be to the detriment of their mental health, their wholeness, for them to leave as rounded members of our community that will go out and contribute. we can't lose that either. So it's a tightrope, and I think sometimes we fall the wrong side of it, and I've done that, and we've gone, no, let's cancel that and let's make them do more stuff so they get better grades. And I've fallen on that side, and I've fallen on the fluffy side as well, where I've said, let's have loads of trips and we're not keeping them in. And all I've done is frustrate the English and math teachers who are desperate to get the grades up. So I think I've probably been on both sides of that. I think there's a really fine line for us to walk. And it's easy to walk if you know your results are not going to get you in trouble. It's when you're in a position like ours, if we take our eye off the ball, we'll fall off the cliff.
Sure.
And we can't afford to be the school that's got a falling role, because that means falling income, and that means I have to make people that I really care about redundant, and I don't want to do that.
You've actually had a comment there. Any geography jobs at Passmores? This is so inspiring.
That's very kind of it. Watch this space. If they drop me an email,
I'll put the comments for you, Vic. If you just relay it for me, I'll write it down.
Okay. Vic.Goddard@passmoresacademy.com. Send me an email. We always need good teachers.
Yeah. Last question. What is your biggest wish for the teaching profession for this academic year?
That they leave us alone to do our job. That's the biggest thing. Just what I don't want. Let's be honest. This Secretary of State is not going to last much longer. You know, he'll last till October when the reshuffle is likely to happen, and then he'll get and schools are reopened, as they would say, never closed. The schools are wider opening. He can then take the blame if that doesn't happen, and then he'll be gone. What I don't want is a new Secretary of State who wants to make a name for themselves, because that's what happens. You know, they come in and they want to change something for the sake of changing something. And I don't want one of those. What I need them to do is to be quiet. We need a quiet year from the politicians.
Who is your favourite education secretary that you've had?
Estelle Morris, probably.
Second?
God, that's a good one.
Justine Greening?
No, probably not. No. You know what? I have had a real soft spot for everybody in certain ways. I've even got some respect for Gove, and the fact that his single-mindedness drove that. I don't think he did it right, but you know, he had a vision and he delivered it, whether it's right or wrong. Estelle probably. David Blunkett, I think he was. You know, there's Conservatives-wise, I think Baker did some amazing things, introducing Baker Days. I think that transformed our profession. I think we've used them really badly at times, but you know, actually to say teachers still need training, I think was quite a brave thing to do. I'm glad he did. Yeah.
Okay, Vic, I think that's it. It was such a pleasure to talk to you,
and you, mate.
Just so authentic. Everyone watching this will see that, and you just had a lot of good things that will, I'm sure, help and inspire a lot of people. And good luck with everything this year. And
absolutely privileged to be asked, Tom. Honestly, I always go, why have they asked me? So I really appreciate it, mate. Thank you. I hope we actually see him face to face at some point. This is the closest we've ever been.
Well, I might need to get on some trains again.
Yeah, absolutely. Come and visit.
Cheers, Vic. And
all the best, buddy.
Speak to you soon.
Cheers.